he doesn't want to take responsibility for almost anything.
Leaders are not responsible for a person. If he didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility.
The sheriff has to go. He has to resign. I don't see any way he can credibly function in that role anymore.
Breaking now, the Democratic rebuttal to that Republican memo.
The information that was used in part in the FISA application came from a trusted source, Christopher Steele.
I don't think he would qualify to actually be in an Austin Powers movie, so I don't know that you could actually say that he was that trusted.
President Trump gets a 93% approval at CPAC. I think conservatives, we've all kind of rallied behind him, and because he's gotten things done.
Check this out. The mother and daughter fight for their lives, getting into a shootout with an armed robber inside their Oklahoma liquor store. You're going to meet those brave women at 7:20.
Monday is so far away. No, it's not. Marty Jordan.
There you go. I mean, they're coming at you. I mean, I know it's hard to think of the party attitude on a Monday morning as you're hauling your butt to work.
Come on.
You don't think so?
Every day should be party. Make today your best party yet.
Right. Show up late and think about something else.
Drink a lot.
Right, yeah.
Oh, you're talking about that kind of party?
Right, yeah,
I thought you were talking about like a Tupperware party.
Right, which is good. But you feel pressure at those
Those are a
parties.
lot of fun.
But you feel pressure at those parties to buy something,
You do.
even if you keep things fresh on their own.
But you learn how to burp the box.
Right, absolutely.
That's how they do it.
I remember
You learn to burp at a Tupperware party. That's the best.
That's exactly what they do.
My mom had Tupperware
yeah.
party after Tupperware party, but the top one was we got 2 lawn chairs out of it because she
Look
did
at
so
that.
well. Yeah.
Did they say
She was very
Tupperware?
successful.
No, and we kept them forever because we felt like we got them for free. It was like a
Badge of honor.
trophy.
All right. As interesting as Brian's story is this morning, there is a lot of news we need to tell you about, and there's some news that has been brought to our attention down in Florida after that school shooting. Students are going to return to the school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, this week, and today teachers and staff are heading back to prepare.
This as President Trump puts school safety at the top of his agenda for his meeting with the governors today.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of intensity up there. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with what's next as Congress comes back to work.
That's right. Good morning, guys. They're trying to get back to normal down in Parkland, but the nation's governors are gathering here in Washington for their annual winter meeting. President Trump is hosting them this morning at the White House in just a few hours, and the top issue for discussion will be school safety.
We'll be talking about Parkland and the horrible event that took place last week. I think we'll make that first on our list because we have to end our country of what's happening with respect to that subject.
Now, all eyes will be on Florida's Governor Rick Scott, who has led the calls for more to be done.
Harden the schools. We've got to make sure we deal with the fact that there are people out there that have mental illness issues. They shouldn't have access to a gun. If you threaten people or yourself, you shouldn't have access to a gun. I'm going to work every day between now and the end of session on one purpose: get this passed.
Scott has launched an investigation into law enforcement's response to the shooting, holding everyone accountable from the FBI to the Broward County Sheriff's Department. And as you mentioned, Brian, Congress returns today under a lot of pressure to act in the wake of the shooting. And there's nothing specific to gun control on either the House or Senate agenda, but we expect that's going to change as the president has proposed several measures to consider. The big question is going to be whether they can find that elusive thing in Washington, bipartisanship. It's going to be a very telling week.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, Griff. Thanks so much. Although we've had nonstop gun debates really forever in this country, and the Second Amendment's not going anywhere, very interesting to see if Marco Rubio and the president will combine forces to see if they raise the age to buy an AR-15 or a rifle up to 21. It'll be also very interesting to see if maybe they push for any type of ban of AR-15s, which people like the Congressman Brian Mast, a Republican from Florida, brought up yesterday.
That's part of the discussion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
19 in the House.
Yeah, there are also local lawmakers down in the state of Florida that are calling for the sheriff to be suspended while they investigate, because there are reports that there are 3 additional deputies that were on the grounds of the school, in addition to that school resource officer, Scott Peterson, who were there and did not storm the school.
Why didn't they go in? There's a story down in the Fort Lauderdale area in Broward County that apparently there's a possibility that there could have been a stand-down order. In other words, hey, deputies, you just don't go in until the SWAT team arrives. You combine that, why were they outside when the guy was clearly shooting people inside? At the same time, all these warning flags were missed. There were a number of phone calls. The sheriff said they received 18 phone calls about this shooter. 16 of them were handled correctly. 2 were not, and the deputies involved in those have been assigned to other duties. Meanwhile, the sheriff himself, Ainsley, to your point, 73 House Republicans down in Florida have said he's got to quit. But the sheriff says he's just doing his job and he's not going anywhere.
As I said, I'm the sheriff. My name's on the door. The people responsible are the ones who took the calls and didn't follow up on them, as it was with the FBI, as it was with any person. Leaders are responsible for the agency, but leaders are not responsible for a person. I gave him a gun. I gave him a badge. I gave him the training. If he didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility.
But we know after Columbine, the tactics changed. Don't wait on the outside. You have to go in. He did not go in. So let them sort it out. Let the people of Florida decide if those lawmakers, the 74 lawmakers, are going to be adhered to, and he's going to be suspended or fired. But I also think it's fascinating to find out that this guy was thrown out of school. 3 days later, he buys an AR-15. And I'm just wondering if they are called to his house, according to BuzzFeed, 22 additional times along with the 23. If you are tossed out and if you put a gun to 3 different people's heads, including, I believe the report was, to your mom's head, threw her against the wall twice. Why is that not included in a background check? Who is safer by not including this abhorrent behavior on a background check? So the police reports, the arrivals, at the very least, alert local sheriffs that this 18-year-old wants to buy an AR-15. And then the sheriff gets a call from the gun shop owner, and he says, yeah, whatever you do, don't sell Nicholas Cruz that gun, and maybe it stops in his tracks.
And I don't think that's political. I think Republicans and Democrats would agree with that.
I hope so.
If you have dozens, if the cops have come to your house dozens of times, you're slamming your mom against the wall and putting a gun or whatever, that needs to be on your report. Same with all that stuff he posted on social media. That needs to be on his report.
That he's cutting himself?
Yeah, and doing all that to animals.
Bringing a dead bird to class and holding it there?
There were never any police reports filed. That's the problem. They would go, a domestic thing, they'd show up, they'd say, okay, we fixed it, and then they went away. Is that possible, Steve, to show up at somebody's house and not write up a report? It happens every day.
But yet we have a detailed report that when they showed up, his mom was thrown against the wall. That was the mom's complaint. How do we know that unless it was recorded?
There was never a complaint filed against the kid. That's the problem.
But somewhere this is down in the police records.
Why did they go to that house? It was right there, but that was not part of a background check that goes into a firearm.
Which I think has to be. I think that multiple police reports. Now, I know the negativity is domestic reports. If you're in a heated dispute with a spouse and the spouse wants to get you back and your passion's guns, then she writes that in, the kid and your spouse can't get a gun. That's the bad part. But the good part is we err on the side of safety. So the next kid who's 18 years old and out of control with multiple alerts on his background that he's going to kill somebody quickly, they get stopped.
And that happening dozens of times. I understand, like in a divorce situation, sometimes that happens. Guy calls on the wife calls on the guy 1 or 2 times. But the cops went, how many times did you say? Dozens of times.
Everyone called the cops. The cops never called the FBI. The cops didn't put his background check. He goes into a gun shop. 3 days after he gets suspended from school, gets an AR-15, and he shoots everything up on February 15th.
They didn't have to call the FBI because somebody else called the FBI, and they dropped the ball as well. It's just a heartbreaking series of drop balls. What they've got to do going forward is figure out how to make sure this never happens again. All right, it's 7:10 now here in New York City, and Jillian's got a lot of headlines.
That's right. Good morning to you guys. And we're actually following extreme weather across the country. So let's begin there. At least 5 people are dead after tornadoes and torrential rains carved a path of destruction through the Midwest. Winds in some areas reaching up to 120 miles per hour, flattening homes and flipping cars. The region also struggling with major flooding. The Ohio River in Cincinnati rising above 60 feet. That's its highest level in 2 decades. In just a few minutes, we'll have a live report from New Richmond, Ohio, where residents are being evacuated as their entire village is underwater. Tense moments overnight as a United Airlines flight attempts to land with a blown tire. Look at the response there. The damage was done during takeoff from Newark, New Jersey, but the pilot kept going on to Portland, Oregon, the aircraft safely landing. Emergency vehicles on standby at Portland International as a precaution. No injuries were reported. The movie studio co-founded by Harvey Weinstein is now expected to file for bankruptcy. The Weinstein Company's last-ditch efforts on a $500 million sale falling apart overnight. The board of directors saying they have no other choice but to file for bankruptcy in order to maximize the business's value. Harvey Weinstein was ousted from the company last year after several sexual misconduct claims were made against him. Thousands are expected to pay respects at the public viewing of America's pastor Billy Graham today. The closed casket will be on display at the Billy Graham Public Library in Charlotte. Former President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush will pay tribute this afternoon. On Wednesday, Graham's body will lie in honor in the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, followed by a private funeral service on Friday in Charlotte. President Trump will be among the 2,000 guests in attendance. Guys, to you.
Viewing starts today. All right. Thank you very much, Jillian.
Thank you, Jillian. Democrats say their FISA rebuttal memo tears the Republicans' version apart. But Andy McCarthy says it actually does more harm to the Democrats than good. And he's going to join us next to tell you why.
And you've heard the one about a horse walking into a bar, right?
Sure.
What about the drunk guy riding a horse on a freeway?
Again?
Knock, knock.
Plus, every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7 at Channel 115.
Would there have been a warrant, a FISA warrant granted without the inclusion of the Steele dossier?
I think, and the only testimony we have on this is that it was a part of the complete whole of the application, and all the parts were important. So I don't know that I can answer that, except to say I think it was important.
Ranking member Adam Schiff touting the Democrats' rebuttal memo on the Sunday morning shows, but downplaying the role of the Steele dossier in securing the surveillance warrants against Carter Page. Our next guest says that wasn't the only thing wrong with the rebuttal. Joining us right now is the former assistant U.S. attorney and contributing editor for National Review, Andy McCarthy. Andy, you said this actually bolsters Devin Nunes and his review on this. In what way?
Well, it shows, Brian, that when it gets down to Carter Page narrowly, no matter what Congressman Schiff says about, the many layers of information that was in the warrant or that were in the warrant, what was specifically alleged about Page was the meetings with the 2 top Russian operatives, which they only get from the Steele dossier. Without that allegation, you may have a lot of information about why Russia's bad and the bad things that Russia is trying to do. But you don't have anything that shows that Carter Page is an agent of a foreign power, as that term is defined under FISA law.
Right. And you talk about they didn't include the wiretaps that show that the Russians didn't think much of Carter Page as a source or a resource dating back from 2013, and how he helped the FBI in 2015 oust some Russian bad guys. To the heart of this, what did they actually tell the FISA judge about the Steele dossier? Did they say this was opposition research? And they said this: the FBI speculates that the identified U.S. person, you don't have to say U.S. person, you could have said Hillary Clinton, you could have said the DNC, was likely looking for information that could be used to discredit candidate number 1. Likely and speculates. That is not being transparent about the Steele document commissioned by Fusion GPS that was paid for by the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Why not just put it out there? Hillary Clinton's people paid for this. I believe in it, Judge, but you tell me what you think. Why not say that?
Yeah, that's what transparency would have been. I think where they talk about a U.S. person there, I think they're talking about Glenn Simpson of Fusion. And that just underscores, if you feel like you have to disclose Fusion, how do you not feel like you have to disclose the people behind Fusion who are actually sponsoring this thing? And, obviously, if you know for a certainty that there's a very specific political motivation behind this, namely that it's the opposition candidate looking for basically monitoring of somebody tied to the other campaign, why not just come out and say that? And I think, Brian, you know, if they could poll 100 federal judges and ask them if a warrant was presented to you and that fact was withheld, what would you think about that? What do you imagine those judges would say?
They would say, I need to know that information, especially without a jury or a defense attorney to push back on the other side. It's up to the judge to know everything. This whole process of a FISA court needs the utmost integrity. We gave these people permission to do this after 9/11, to pursue terrorists in a covert way. And they seem to be abusing the credit we gave them.
Yeah, well, you know, look, it wouldn't be that big of a deal that they gave a little bit of a fuzzy description of what the background biases were of this of this dossier. If they had done the most important thing here, which we're like when we focus on Steele, we're getting a million miles away from, which is the credibility of his informants. This was completely uncorroborated information from unidentified people who we don't even know for a fact that they exist. And even if they did exist, they're not the ones who saw and heard the things that you were asking the judge to issue the warrant based on.
And we're going to talk more on this, and please read Andy's column. He breaks it down for you. Today marks the 20th anniversary of the 1993 World Trade Center bombings. Andy McCarthy, you were the lead prosecutor in that blind shake case, and so much has happened since. What are your reflections?
Well, you know, I think that was the declaration of war by radical Islam against the United States, but I think looking back, especially not only 25 years after that bombing, but 17 years after 9/11, look at how much better our Homeland Security works. And that's a credit to the FBI, the intelligence services, the way the New York City police, for example, in our city, the way they've worked together now and really proactively gone after these threats. There's a reason why we've been safe, even though we've continued to be a target.
Andy McCarthy, you knew how dangerous these people were, and that was the flashing siren in '93. We'd find out again in 2001. Thanks so much, Andy McCarthy, and we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Brian.
Straight ahead, have you seen this incredible video? A mom and daughter use their own gun
through the Midwest.
Yep, the Ohio River rising to its highest point in 2 decades, threatening homes, threatening businesses.
Robert Guadarrama from our Fox affiliate in Cincinnati is live in Richmond, Ohio, where the entire city is fighting to stay afloat. Robert?
That's right. This community is no stranger to flooding of this severity, but it hasn't been at this level in 20 years since the 1997 flood. That was at about 65 feet as far as the river level. This time around, we're looking at just over 60 feet. That's when it crested at about 9:15 last night. It has since dropped a few inches, but take a look. We're right here in the main part of New Richmond, where you can see straight ahead, that archway there, that is the Ohio River, just beyond that arch. And look at how far the river has risen, now consuming several streets of this small town. Again, we've seen neighbors helping each other because they've experienced this a few times before. Now, as you can see behind me, look at this car here, now in about a foot of water, and this is nothing compared to how it is if you get closer to the river. They're looking at several feet of water. Now, that's the main street there right along the riverbank, and that's where all of the businesses are, all the shops and restaurants here for this town. All of them had to be shut down. The good news is we did speak with the city administrator here, who says that there had to be no water rescues, but evacuations, of course, were necessary. Live here in New Richmond, Ohio, I'm Robert Guadarrama. Back to you.
All right, Robert, thank you very much. Heartbreaking images. Meanwhile, take a look at this, folks. A mother-daughter duo taking matters into their own hands when an armed robbery suspect ambushes their Oklahoma family liquor store.
Yep, the two quickly grabbing their guns from behind the counter and opening fire on the masked man.
As her mom struggles with the suspect, the heroic daughter firing another bullet, giving them the opportunity to escape. And joining us now is that mother, Tina Ring. Tina, thanks for being with us. Tell us what happened.
I was standing at one side of the counter. My daughter was over by the register. And a man walked in with a hood over his head and a mask on his face and a sawed-off shotgun. He pointed at me first and told me to open that it's a robbery, and I questioned. I said, "What?" And then he stuck the gun back up in my face and said, "It's a robbery." And so he told my daughter to open up the register, and so she did, and then he took the money, and then he came back over to me and asked me where the other register was, and I told him I didn't have one, and he's like, "Where's the other money?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." Yep. And then I told him, I said, "I recognize you." It's like, "Who? What are you doing?" And
did you actually recognize him?
Yeah,
he was a customer.
He was a customer. He had just been in the day before and an hour and like 40 minutes before that.
Yeah. Apparently, police in your neck of the woods believe he is responsible for a string of armed robberies in the area. I'm sure, Tina, you've had that gun for a while. Did you ever think you were going to have to use it? Did you ever come close?
No, I never in my life thought I'd have to use it.
Well, why did you decide that this time you were gonna? Because it looked like he was going to take the money and go, but you decided otherwise.
Well, when we ducked under I thought he had left the building. I mean, I saw him go out the door. We ducked down underneath the counter, and then honestly, all I saw was the shotgun and his face, and I pulled the trigger. Actually, I don't even remember pulling the first two shots.
Tina, what goes through your mind? Because I'm a mother. I can't imagine my daughter being there, and I would think I've got to protect her first. But then, I feel like I would be so scared in that situation. But does your adrenaline take over, that motherly instinct take over? What do you go through?
You just do. I mean, I didn't really think about anything other than just, I could just stop, and he just kept coming back at me. Yep. And it's like, just stop. And
did he fire off any shots too? Did you and your daughter get injured?
Yeah, no. Well, I ended up with 7 staples, but that wasn't from the shot. That was from when he got the gun away from me.
Well, he got the gun away from you?
Yeah, after I had unloaded on him. Yeah. He just kept coming and just kept coming at me, and I was just telling him to leave. Just at this point, I seen that he was hurt, and I was just like, let him get some help, just leave. Yeah. I don't really know what I was saying. Right. I don't know what he was saying to me, and then he just lunged at me and he grabbed my gun, and at that point, all I could think about was keeping my gun pointed to where she couldn't, away from her, and I just started just pulling the trigger and just pulling the trigger. Kept pulling the trigger so that way I would make sure that it was unloaded. I didn't know how many shots I had shot him.
Well, you were in a fight for your life.
You were. You did everything right.
Yeah.
Well, he's in the hospital, I assume, now. You shot him, and hopefully he'll end up in prison for a very long time. I wish you all the best.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lastly, how are you doing?
I'm not sure. I mean, yesterday was rough. Emotional. Makes you appreciate your family, appreciate being alive.
What are you going to do with the liquor store now?
At 10 o'clock, I'm going to open the door and start selling. I'm not going to be a victim. I mean, I have bills to pay. And
absolutely. And you know what, Tina? They know that you've got a gun. Yeah. So, next time.
And I had more.
Yeah. All right. Tina Ring, we thank you very much for joining us live today.
Thank you, Tina. We're glad you're okay.
Thank you.
God bless you.
That's tough.
All right. 29 minutes before the top of the hour.
President Trump got high praise after rallying the crowd at CPAC.
The fact is, we need more Republicans to vote. We need more Republicans. That's why you have to get out and you have to fight for 18. You have to do it.
Eric Trump was in the crowd for that speech. What did we think? Probably he liked it. We're going to talk to him.
I liked it.
I knew that.
You better move, you better dance. Let's make a night you won't remember. I'll be the one.
Choice.com.
The fact is, we need more Republicans to vote. We want to get our agenda, because now what we have to do is, in order to get a vote to fix our military, we have to give them $100 billion in stuff that nobody in this room, including me, wants. We need more Republicans. That's why you have to get out and you have to fight for 18.
So there you got POTUS 45 at CPAC on Friday. His son, Eric Trump, is the executive vice president of the Trump Organization. He's running the show while his dad's president. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, guys.
He was very funny. He started out with the bald spot joke.
He was awesome. That's why he won this presidential race. I mean, he was so great. When he said, should I go off the teleprompter or should I just keep doing this? You know, quite frankly, the speech on the teleprompter is a little boring, so I'm just going to, do my thing.
Now, as his son, do you go, uh-oh? Like, do you say,
honestly,
or do you like that?
That's the best of Trump. That's the best of who the guy is, right? The American people obviously rejected the traditional political class because they were boring and they never got any coverage and they didn't speak their mind and everything was scripted. I mean, he went out there, he was having a blast. He spoke for an hour and 15 minutes, and he was incredible. I mean, he was incredible.
You know that song, How Do You Like Me Now?
Mm-hmm.
Brian says that to his ex-girlfriends. Your dad, I think of that song. CPAC did not allow your dad to speak 2 years ago, and now he's getting a 93% approval rating on the straw poll.
Yeah, and the people in the room are chanting USA,
So what's your
USA.
message to the Republican Party that wasn't backing him 2 years ago?
Well, listen, I think it's changed. You know, in defense of the Republican Party 2 years ago, they didn't know who he was. He was a real estate developer out in New York. They didn't know him. They knew a lot of other people, right? They knew kind of the political class, as I mentioned before. They didn't know who he was, and I think he's proven himself. I think he's done a tremendous job. I think he's had one of the most successful first years of any president ever. You see what's happening with the economy and the military and everything else, deregulation, jobs are coming back to this country. Wages are going up for the first time in 10 years. When was the last time we saw wages go up in this country?
Taxes? Hello?
It's incredible. I mean, it's incredible. Apple's coming back, industry's coming back to America. Everything that he said he would do, he's done. He's actually done better than he would even say he would do it. And, that's why conservatives are behind him.
I know he's working on the trade deals, too, especially NAFTA, and they're round 8, and it's not easy. But let's move on to something you're passionate about, and that's guns. And we heard about the horrific shooting on the 14th, and here we are 2 weeks later, and we're talking about it in a way we haven't talked in a while. We have not had a Republican president in office to say, I'm thinking about a few things. Number one, I'm open to arming teachers. Number two, I'm open to, if you want to buy a rifle, wait till you're 21. And I'm open to universal background checks. So is Marco Rubio in 2 or 3 of those things. And I'm wondering, with 19 other Republicans in the House feeling the same way, when Congress back, and I know you're away from the policy part of it, but as a big gun guy and with the last name Trump, do you think something's going to get done? Do you hope it does?
I hope it does. Listen, I'm the biggest Second Amendment person there is. I'm a big believer in it, right? At the same time, we can't have our kids get shot up in schools, right? You need to do certain things. There were so many red flags on this kid. There were so many red flags. Nothing was done about it. But I think you need to go in there. I think you need to have even greater background checks. I know one thing that falls through the cracks is, youth, right? A lot of times their background record isn't actually exposed. Their record starts at, when they become an adult, at 18. But if you have a kid that's been, the police have been called on 39 times, shouldn't that be a warning flag?
Shouldn't police reports be on there?
So when you're 18 and you decide to go out and buy a gun, shouldn't those 39 police calls be on that record? There are common sense things we can do, right?
What about the NRA? Should they give a little bit? Do you agree with your dad that a teenager shouldn't be able to buy an assault rifle?
And listen, at the end of the day, I think the NRA will. They're great people. My father said that the other day. We know so many of them. They are great people. They believe in freedom. They believe in this country. They're great people. I'm a member of the NRA. But at the end of the day, we cannot have schools get shot up. There are things that have to be done. At the same time, this isn't just a gun problem. It's really not a gun problem. I mean, it's a mental health problem in this country, right? It's a societal problem. The fact that there is a kid that's willing to go into a school and shoot unarmed, innocent, children, classmates of him, is unacceptable. I mean, where's the father there? Where's, the parenting? Where's the morals? Where's there's a lot of societal problems that often cause these issues that also have to be addressed.
Right, and that's why your dad's going to be talking to the nation's governors today about school safety.
Yeah. So it's so important. It's so important.
But also, the president, you could argue, doesn't get elected without the NRA. And if he does 3 things the NRA doesn't want, is that a risk for him?
No, I don't think so. I think these are common sense things that people want. I don't think, again, I'm a big Second Amendment person. I don't think it's a big deal if you raise the age to 21. I think everybody would, quite frankly, welcome even more comprehensive background checks. At least personally, I don't want to see a whack job get any kind of dangerous object of any kind. I don't want them buying a chainsaw. I don't want them buying a hammer. I probably don't want them buying a car because they can be just as deadly. I surely don't want them buying an assault rifle, right? So, I mean, I think there are common sense things that have to be done. And but again, I think this is more of a societal problem. You know, you didn't see this 30 years ago, and what's changed? Sure. You have social media, you have other things, you have other factors in society that do have to be addressed.
Yeah, the Democrats released their FISA rebuttal over the weekend. What are your thoughts?
Listen, my thoughts is they dug and they dug and they dug and they finally found themselves. And, you know, it's awful what happened. I mean, you had the FBI and the Department of Justice. You had them use opposition research to spy on a presidential candidate in this country. And it's horrible. It's the worst abuse imaginable. This is something you'd see in a third world country. And it happened here. And, you know, people have to take this seriously. There's nothing worse than when, you know, government, I mean, it's just very, very dark what happened. And I don't think the Democratic memo said anything. In fact, I think it confirmed that, you know, the judge wasn't told that this was opposition research that was ultimately being used.
It was political.
And this is the greatest abuse of power you could see. I mean, it is the greatest abuse of power. And I think as citizens, we should all be concerned about it.
Well, you got to get to the bottom of it. But at the same time, a lot of the people who did this work for your father's Department of Justice and FBI.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people who did it should be held accountable. I mean, they really should be held accountable. And I think the American people are seeing that and demanding it at this point. But what started off as a hoax, you know, Trump won the election because of Russia, has been proven to be nothing further from the truth, and they ended up finding themselves in this whole irony, and you know, it's just kind of amusing.
But the Russians being bold enough to meddle has to be stopped, and I hope that gets addressed.
I agree. And by the way, I wish Obama would have done that. If he knew, which he clearly did, I wish he would have stopped that. And the big question is, why did he do nothing about it?
So your sister was over representing our country wonderfully as we closed out the Olympics in South Korea. And one Olympian, Gus Kenworthy, called her out and said, we worked so hard to be in the Olympics. And he went on to say, he said, so proud of all these people, everybody here. Worked so hard to be in the Olympics and have the opportunity to walk in the closing ceremonies. Well, everyone except Ivanka. Honestly, what is she doing here? What is your reaction to that?
You know, I think it's disgusting, right? I mean, you're talking about school shootings back in the U.S. You're talking about, you know, and then you see this. I mean, the Olympics is a time of happiness. We did great. We won so many gold medals. Ivanka is an unbelievable representative of this country. She is so poised. She's so elegant. You know, she's a role model for so many people. So to hear that, I mean, that's not what the Olympics is about. Politics should not enter into the Olympics.
Does it bother you as a brother?
Yeah, it does bother me, and it should bother us as a society. Could you imagine if, you know, Sasha or Malia went over to the Olympics and somebody said that about them? You know, that's not what the Olympics is about. The Olympics is actually a great avenue to escape everything that we talk about all the time. You know, some of the worst things in society, right? It's supposed to be a representation.
We won a gold in curling for the first time ever. We upset Sweden. That's the story.
And cross country and so many other great events. I mean, it's a way to get away from the nonsense. And this is just. It's gross. It's disgusting. Ivanka is beautiful. She's elegant. She was an incredible representative of this country, and we should be very proud of her.
Well, his comments not in the Olympic spirit. Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Great to see you.
Thanks.
All right, coming up on this Monday, a landmark case heads to the U.S. Supreme Court this morning, and it could be a major blow to labor unions. Charles Payne's been looking at what it means, and he's going to break it down. Live from New York, coming up next.
Hey.